I've had people, not necessarily business, because they know we're talking about business people, not just average people, but people who are CEOs and stuff. But they've asked me questions of human nature. For example, they'll say, they'll call people I know, and I know a lot of CEOs and people have been very successful, I suppose, and they'll say things like, I make all this money and my relatives don't, so I give them $17,000 for each kid, each cousin, and the more that I give them money, the more they resent me. And then why is that? And I'll talk about envy and Hesiod, or in Topoi in Greek literature, where the more that you show magnanimity, the less it's reciprocated in kind. It's more philosophical questions, or they'll talk about deterrence. I've had people in the military ask about deterrence, especially, and I've tried to explain it's very hard to achieve. It's very easy to surrender, but it's just all deterrence is. I think the classical definitions are a little bit mistaken when they say it's literally, as the Latin implies, discouraging somebody from being aggressive by demonstration or assurances or transmission of knowledge that in a cost-to-benefit analysis they have more to lose than to gain, and therefore they won't do it. So in the 19th century, you sent a big ship into the harbor of a neutral to show power. That's still true, but I think it's more that ignorance, that there are powers, there's Iran, there's Russia, there's China, there's Hamas, there's Hezbollah, there's Israel, and there's us. And when the powerful nations do not make it clear, their potential to inflict damage, the real capability, I should say, and their intent to use it, then powers that are weaker make stupid decisions. And they say, well, I'm not sure after Afghanistan, I'm not sure the United States is strong anymore. Or they let a balloon go through, or they turned over $50 billion worth of weaponry to the Taliban. Or in the case of Israel, Hamas said, well, they have massive protests in the streets about a Supreme Court decision, and they're letting 20,000 of us come into Israel every day as day workers, and they're paying us 3 times what we could get. And they just don't seem the old Israelis anymore. And so when that happens, then war is seen as a corrective. It's a lab experiment. I mean, it's not the lab experiment. It's the result of the lab experiment. It doesn't have to take place. If World War in 1941, when Hitler declared war on us and earlier Russia, 6 months earlier, any sane person would have said to him, and many did, Herr Hitler, your alliance of Japan and Italy has 1/4 the population, a fraction of the GDP, a fraction of the national resources of what you've now combined against us, the British Empire, the United States, and Soviet Russia. This is insane. There's no way we can win this war. And he would have answered, as he did, well, the British they don't fight. They appeased us all during the 30s. And the Americans are isolationists. And the Russians had the Molotov, they begged us. And so you could say appeasement, isolation, collaboration disguised the real military strength of these powers, and then the lesser power did something stupid. And then war is necessary to correct those beliefs. So when the war is over, then you could say, well, guess what? Russia, the United States, and the British Empire were a hell of a lot stronger than Japan, Italy, and Germany, but we had to have 65 million dead to prove that obvious fact. And why? Because people did not make their potential known at the outset. So if we had had clear demonstrations of what would happen if Hamas went in there earlier, I think we wouldn't have had this happen. And I think we're in danger now of sending a message of proportionality or tit for tat. I'll give you an example. If on the eve of the Israeli messaging to the United States and back and forth. The United States said, well, you can hit back for, you can hit back, but it has to be within limits. Within limits. That's what we were told. And they told the Iranians the same thing. They said, after they took out the Republican Guard grandees in Damascus, we expect your attack to be within limits. And that was disguising reality. And the reality is that the Israelis had the ability to do enormous damage to the Iranians, and the Iranians didn't have the ability necessarily to do it to the Israelis. So what did within limits mean when you say to the Iranians, strike within limits? 5 dead Jews, 100 Israelis, 2,000. They didn't know that, so they were going to press their luck and find out where. Had they said the following, we want to assure you that not one of hundreds of missiles or drones that you send into Israel will hit the target, because not only will the Israelis knock the ballistic missiles down, but we and the British and others, maybe even Arabs, will knock down your drones. However, that's the reality. However, if you send one missile and try to test that reality, you're going to regret it, because there's going to be a retaliation that's going to take out your grid, your nuclear. Then they wouldn't have done it if they believed you. And so then you have these wars to reconfirm or reestablish who is strong and who is weak, when there are mechanisms to prevent it before you have to go to war.